Welcome to TSNN's live webinar series. Today's webinar will discuss sustainable trade shows look good, feel good, do good. Our expert moderator and panelists will offer polling questions throughout our session and will answer questions the last 15 minutes of our webinar. So please join in. To submit a question or comment at any time, please click on the Ask a Question button on the bottom of your screen. Simply type your message into the box and click on the Submit button. Alternatively, you can join the conversation and ask questions on Twitter using the hashtag TSNN webinar at any time. At this time, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Arlene Shows, Marketing Manager for TSNN, to say a few words. Arlene, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, and hello everyone from TSNN, and welcome. TSNN is always grateful to offer our audience such amazing industry experts when we dive into our webinar offerings. Today, we will cover a trending issue which we know is not going away anytime soon, becoming more green in the trade show and event space. This stellar panel will help educate us on the importance of sustainability, so thanks for tuning in. It's important to thank our sponsors, MCCA and Signature Boston, and Onstream Media. They always continue to help us deliver these educational topics to you free of charge. All the TSNN webinars are brought to you by Onstream Media, the leader in multimedia webinar and webcasting services. Onstream Media is a leading online service provider of corporate audio and web communications, including webinar and webcasting services. Onstream Media's innovative webinar platform, Visual Webcaster 4.0, allows event managers to easily produce, schedule, and invite attendees to highly interactive, live, and on-demand webinars that can be accessed via a desktop or a mobile device. No downloads are ever required, and the solution can scale to support tens of thousands of attendees. The platform has been ranked #1 by top 10 reviews and is being used to power today's event. To learn more about Onstream products, please visit onstreammedia.com. Another round of thanks goes out to Signature Boston and Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. They own and operate the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center and the Heinz Convention Center. Boston certainly represents unique benefits and advantages of bringing an event here. I'm from this area, and I've been there many times. I can attest to the excellence of their venue, including state-of-the-art facilities, first-class hotels, unique history, culture, and top-notch services, including free Wi-Fi throughout the BCEC and the Heinz. Now, allow me to introduce our moderator today. Nancy Zavada is a leader, an innovator, and an entrepreneur in the meeting, planning, and events industry. Nancy is principal of Neat Green, a sustainable conference management and consulting firm she founded in 1994. She has been internationally recognized as a leader in the environmentally responsible meeting and event management field, and she co-founded the Green Meeting Industry Council. She received the Achievement for Innovation in Hospitality Award from the Institute for Innovation and Economic Development, California State University. She is co-author of Simple Steps to Green Meetings and Events and Saving Green by Going Green. Be sure to visit her blog on neatgreen.com, where she offers resources, tips, ideas, and funny stories about the life of a green meeting planner. We can't wait to learn, Nancy. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Arlene. I'm happy to be here today, and I would love to introduce my esteemed panel. First up, we have Kenji Haroutunian. He is Vice President of Emerald Expositions Sports Group. He's a 29-year veteran of the human-powered outdoor industry, working for many years in specialty outdoor store management and teaching outdoor skills, including advanced climbing and wilderness navigation courses, during and after completing his degree. In 1999, he began working for Outdoor Retailer and has recently been appointed Vice President for Emerald Expositions, directing the Outdoor Sports Group. He has spearheaded many industry-focused programs. A 2010 Access Fund Sharp End awardee, Kenji serves on the board of directors of Access Fund and Choose Outdoors, longtime president of the Friends of Joshua Tree, and is a founding director of Tech Society, a new events industry technology organization. Kenji lives with his family of 5 in California and enjoys rock climbing, trail running, skiing, and performing in various musical situations. Welcome, Kenji.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Lindsay Arell. She is the founder and lead strategist of Arell Logic, a firm focused on working with venues and facilities in the hospitality industry to evaluate their operation and implement sustainable practices. By focusing on energy consumption, waste management, water conservation and quality, air quality, and community engagement, her goal is to develop programs that not only reduce a venue's environmental impact, but also provide a cost savings. Lindsay is the current chair of the ASTM E60.02 Sustainable Event Standard and serves on the Green Meeting Industry Council Board of Directors. In addition, Lindsay was recently recognized by the Convention Industry Council with the 2014 Pacer Award specific to the environment. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thanks so much.
And we have John Mikstay. John is with the Manager of Assurance Services, iCompli Sustainability for BPA Worldwide. He has been with the BPA since 2005, previously managing operations and sales for the Events Audit Division before moving over to Sustainability Assurance. His experience in sales, sales management, and event management with for-profit show organizers prior to BPA affords an insider's perspective from which to present the value of certification to sustainable meeting standards and implementing third-party audits to event organizers, brand marketers, and other industry stakeholders. John is a Krakow Leadership Institute alum and a member of the CEIR Research Committee. Welcome to you, John.
Hi.
Now, I think first thing, we'll take a poll, and now that we've introduced ourselves, we'll find out a little bit more about you. So we're going to pose the question. Which is, yes, we have implemented, do you currently have sustainability initiatives in your trade show or organization? Your choices are, yes, we have implemented and measure results. Yes, we are starting to develop and integrate, or no, we haven't started yet, but we're researching. So we'll give you just a moment to answer those and see how we're all doing. All right. Let's show you the results. Great. We've got 33% who have implemented and measure results. 11 are starting, and no, we haven't started, but we are researching. And great. You're here today, and that'll give our speakers and our panelists a little more information on how we can cover our topic today. Let's start by why. Let me set the scene. Trade shows are often seen as one of the highest producers of waste and carbon in the event world. They are also known for heavy energy consumption, water, electricity, and fuel for transportation. In today's world, trade show organizers and exhibitors can also risk their corporate image if their audience perceives them as not being good stewards of the planet. As we know, trade shows are very valuable. In fact, a recent study, 4 out of 5 people walking the show floor are your potential customers. So corporate social responsibility is an additional opportunity for both organizers and exhibitors alike to really shine in their public's eye. We, as organizers, have great opportunities to drive change for our organizations, our exhibitors, and our audience. Why not? When you start looking at some of the recent stats that are coming across about the savings that we're making every single day, look at the potential that our community has as trade show organizers. This recent stat from IMEX America 2013 is incredible to me when you think it's taking this 90 average passenger cars off the road for a year by reusing the carpet. And attendees at UUA General Assembly saved more than 7 garbage trucks full of waste just by taking steps to reduce. So I'd like to start off with Kenji. Can you help us go through some of the issues that are involved with sustainability in trade shows?
Sure, Nancy. Thanks. I think you just detailed the first point there pretty well. That's the carbon footprint, the impact that our industry has. So I'm not going to go too long into that. I think we all kind of get it, that it's a big thing that we do, and it has a lot of potential for improvement. The second point is what I call the dichotomy of growing industries while shrinking impact. So we're all trying to grow our businesses, of course, and kind of the highest goal of trade shows is to grow or to contribute to the growth of the industries that we serve. So there's kind of a double down there that we're trying to grow our own business and grow the industries that we serve, because that's how we win. But we're also trying to shrink impact. So how do you do that? How do you do those two different things? The alternatives to trade shows deserve mentioning, I think, like the virtual showroom, the virtual event that we're in right now, for example, or web conference. Regional gatherings that consume less of the fuel and resources that you discussed earlier. So those are something to talk about. I think we've gone past the times that trade shows were feeling threatened by these alternatives, but certainly they deserve mention and possibly integration. I think some of you have probably heard about hybrid events, which would fall under that line item. So the leveraging partners part of it is something that Emerald does pretty significantly. It really depends on how hard you prioritize or how high you prioritize green initiatives, we'll just call them. Things like getting post-consumer recycled content in your carpet, or switching the building, leveraging the building to switch to biodegradable concessionware. These things really don't involve your business as much as they do your partners in the business. Making it personal is part of it. You talked about the audience aspect of it, and in my audience, it's a pretty sensitive audience. The outdoor sports group, as much as we don't have any illusions that our activities cause quite a bit of carbon footprint, manufacturing, everybody has to use gas and get to the trailhead or get onto the water, and making boats uses a lot of plastic, and et cetera, et cetera. But how do you make that personal so that your audience feels it when they get on site, and they appreciate it, and they'll continue to come and spread the good word about your shows? And then the last point is that spreading the good word. You know, how are you communicating your initiatives? I think that it can easily slide into the realm of doing more damage than help if you're seen as bragging, or what's called greenwashing, which is marketing yourself as a green company or as a green business when you really are still having quite a huge impact, and there's still quite a lot of room to improve. That's kind of the issues as I see them. And then obviously along with the challenges come opportunities. The first one is seeing your business as a life cycle. So all the assets that you have, all the processes that you have in place to produce your event, to set it up, get the audience engaged, stage the event, and then the aftermath of showing what happened and communicating to your audience is a life cycle. And there's a concept called cradle to cradle that is popular in the manufacturing world and getting more popular, and that's a good sort of baseline mindset to look at your business from. What am I doing with my assets? What am I doing with the products? What am I facilitating at the show that can be improved, both in service to your audience and to minimize that footprint? What is the venue doing, and how do you choose your venue, and how do you prioritize what the venues are doing? Because they're in a competition as well. We do our two big shows in Salt Lake City, and that is one of the reasons we're there is because they've been very responsive to some of our requests to try some new things. And I think that's been really helpful. I think the audience appreciates it, and we can talk about details later if you want. What kind of materials are you using? What kind of materials are you drawing attention to in your exhibitor base? So exhibitors use all kinds of different things to showcase their brands at the show. Some are on an empty patch of concrete. Others are building quite elaborate palaces of branding. But what kind of materials, what kind of, not just materials that are being built, but also how are they getting to and from the venue? What kind of fuel, for example? What kind of transportation? The paperless thing is something I thought is a particularly good opportunity to talk about. You have to be careful about paperless, as we're learning at Emerald, for processes like registration and housing. Some customers, some audience members aren't really ready for that, and they have trouble. So you've got to have a backstop if you're going to go paperless. And I think everyone probably knows that email communication open rates aren't going to be the sole way to communicate, even though it's inexpensive and fairly green compared to snail mail or direct marketing. But anyway, I think that paperless is a great opportunity, particularly when it comes to press rooms and that kind of thing. Giving customers choices, so giving your audience members a choice to show how much they care, I suppose. We're launching a program, for example, at Outdoor Retailer that is called Reduce Single Use. So this is something that has to do with single-use water bottles and individual, mostly water we're starting with. So can we reduce that? Can we eliminate that from a show the size of Outdoor Retailer is a big challenge, but it's something we're moving down the path on. And so letting your customers, going back to the point in the earlier slide about making it personal for your audience. And then there's ways to make it fun, and it kind of raises the challenge. Most of you have probably seen this ALS ice bucket challenge, right? Well, that's a way, in a sense, of gamifying a good cause or an agenda that somebody has, and it's been hugely popular and getting millions and millions of dollars into the funnel for the ALS research. So taking that example, that's the sort of thing you could do by measuring or challenging your audience or your exhibitor base to take the next step, whatever that is. So those are some of the issues. I don't want to go on too long. I think if there's any questions or development on any of those topics, we could talk about it. The last thing I would say, though, is I won't read this quote by Yvon Chouinard, but Yvon is the founder of Patagonia, a company that's around $500 million company now that is core to the outdoor industry and the industry that Outdoor Retailer serves. And he's kind of seen as a renegade businessman, but he's also very highly respected in the Wall Street world, and because of how he's done and how he's kind of turned things on its head. And this is one of his tenets, is that there is no such thing as sustainability. This is a goal, it's a process, but there is no destination where you get there. It's always making improvements and working toward bettering your product or bettering your event to make it a more sustainable event, but you're never really going to be there. And just as long as that's understood, I think that your audience understands this and they appreciate the steps that not only you're making, but that you're either helping them make or you're showcasing the developments in your industry that help lead the way forward. So I think that's all I wanted to say about this quote from Yvon.
Thanks, Kenji. Can you talk to us about some of the economic benefits you've experienced?
Well, sure. I think, for example, the paperless press room, that's something that we launched probably 5 years ago, or maybe longer. But what happens in a press room typically is that you end up with tons of press kits. That if in the old model, everyone brings a box or a stack of paper press kits that they'll have a DVD slotted in these days or something like that. And they bring, hundreds of those, and the press comes in, and they pick up the ones they want, and they don't pick them all up. At the end of the show, we end up with, a ton and a half of extra press kits that don't get returned to the manufacturer typically. They just get trashed or recycled. So you end up paying for that drayage. You end up paying for the weight of that stuff being shipped if you're going to keep any of it. And not only that, but each of your press attendees are also paying for that if they put it in their luggage. And these days people are getting charged for it. So there's charges to the company, there's charges to the audience as well, when there's such a much more simple way to deal with it, and that is to just simply disallow paper press kits, or maybe allow an example, one or two, and then you have thumb drives or some very easily downloaded press kit that can be taken home and is actually a little service to your audience members that they can put in their pocket and then set off the alarm at the TSA checkpoint. But that's just one thing, I think.
Great example.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's a great example. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. We're going to talk some more about that when we get to question and answer, I hope, because the economic benefits, I think, are often overlooked or have become a myth that no one talks about. So I'd like to delve into that a little further. But Lindsay, you want to take the reins here and talk about how standards can really help us if you're looking for a framework to move forward.
Sure. So thank you. As Nancy mentioned in the intro, I am the chair of the ASTM E6002 standards, which are a suite of standards that were developed specifically for the meetings and events industry. And what's great about these standards is that they really do kind of address the specific impacts of the meetings and events industry, and they really provide some great guidance in these spaces. As you can see, there's 9 different areas of focus. And a lot of the partners that Kenji just mentioned are really do have their own set of standards. So while there's we're all kind of working towards this common goal, these standards kind of help set a kind of some guidelines that we can all kind of work towards and create this common language. And so the ones that the different standards that have stars next to them are actually also there's a certification process out now that John on the panel works with from iCompli, and the different sectors that have stars next to them actually have suppliers that have achieved the certification. So there is adoption that's moving, and it's really kind of moving the industry forward, and we're really excited to see the leaders in this space that are recognizing the importance of these standards and the importance of creating this common language. And really, within each of those standards, there are 8 different areas of focus. And I think what's so key about this, if you kind of look through these different categories, you'll see that while there is a focus on resources like waste, energy, air quality, and water, there's also a really big focus on staff management and communication and community partners and procurement. And I think those are the areas that really can move a program to be successful. That's really where a lot of the implementation takes place. And what's great about these standards is that they are all, at level 1 at least, they are all cost neutral or cost saving. So you're not having to really implement a lot of new practices that are going to incur a lot of costs. So, it's as simple as having do you have an environmental policy, and is it signed by your executive director or your general manager, or and really once you have an established environmental policy, then you can really kind of shape your programs, and you really have something to it's like a mission statement, right? It's something you can really turn to say that these are our goals and this is what we're going to move forward. There's also, a lot in there about how do you communicate, and how do you communicate between a planner and attendees and the venue and your different suppliers and your stakeholders, and really making sure that you're getting a lot of, that you're doing that early on in the process. So as Nancy mentioned, I work with a lot of venues, and I think that's perhaps one of the most frustrating things that we come across as a supplier is, working with the planner and having a lot of the ability to implement a lot of different practices, but not hearing about the goals from the planner until, it's almost, I don't want to say too late, but it's after the fact. And, it kind of doesn't allow for success always as much as if we would have, been able to develop a plan together. And I would say vice versa. I think same thing with planners. I know that there's, I've talked with some who were in venues or worked with suppliers, and they just said, if they would only knew what that supplier was capable of, that's the choice they would have made, and that's the direction they would have gone to. So it's really this back and forth, making sure that you're including this in your planning process right off the bat. And so for exhibits and trade shows, that includes also engaging your exhibitors, right? And you're starting to see more and more of these trade shows that are having, certain criteria that the exhibitors have to adhere to, as far as, having limited swag and, really trying to be partners to the show, rather than, bringing everything and leaving it there and then letting the venue and the show deal with it. So, we're seeing a lot of packet in, packet out policies and things like that. And so, again, the next slide, why the standards, in my opinion, it's great because they create a common language. So we all, if I'm an exhibitor and I know that a show is using the exhibitor standard for their show, I have a set of expectations that I can meet. And if that becomes the status quo, then I know as long as I follow those best practices, and obviously you can always do more, but if you keep that as a minimum, you're going to be good. And you keep consistency. So again, it's common language, common best practices, and obviously then that enhances our sustainable practices overall, and we have created a common good. And finally, I just wanted to go into, it really does take everyone's participation. So, these are kind of what I say is the main players. So, you have your show organizer. They're, setting this expectation. They're allowing the framework for, exhibitors and attendees to kind of work within and to be successful. But also, your general services contractors, they play a major role in this space, and especially with a lot of the products, or being able to, create signage that can be used year after year. It's not branded with, the show's location or the dates, and, looking at different materials, and really also being able to say, if you're going to be purchasing, if you're going to be using a compostable product for, say, for table covers, is it actually being composted? And, you're working with the venue to kind of know what is capable, because I've seen it so often, too, where people have the best intentions, and maybe they'll invest in some compostable products, and then it turns out that that venue doesn't compost, so that just ends up going into a landfill. So if they would have just gone ahead and got a recyclable product that could actually be recycled, then they would actually, had achieved their goals. So really making sure that what you're purchasing, what you're using, is really makes sense for your venue too. And then again, like I said, engaging the exhibitor and then engaging the venue early on in the process as well, and letting them know your goals and really, allowing them to work with your exhibitors too. Again, I manage a program at the Colorado Convention Center, and we have a very, very extensive donation program. We call it our Reclaim Room. And, if we're able to get some sort of communication to the exhibitors ahead of time, they're a lot more likely to identify the products that they want to donate. And if they know where those products are going, they're more likely to do that than try to trash them or ship them back and trash them, at their home office. So just making sure that all of these players are in communication as soon as possible, I think, is the real key to success.
Absolutely right. I think that's what makes this so complicated, is there's so many moving parts and so many moving players, and a lot of times the people who sign up for the exhibits are not the people who are there on the show floor, and it's really, it takes a lot of follow-through. So I appreciate you talking about that. And as well, making the APEX standards seem much, much easier than when I read them. I appreciate that. Next up, I'd like to have John really talk about, okay, we know all the groups now. Now, how do we get them to comply? What's in it for them? Is it the carrot or the stick, John? Are you joining us, John?
We've lost John. I'm calling him right now.
All right. While we're waiting for John to come back to us, let's go ahead and talk about really telling your sustainability story. I'd be interested from both Kenji and Lindsay, how do you go out to those groups and tell their story? How do you share that out?
Well, I'll go on that. I think it's really it's a perfect picture that you're putting up, because it is a bit of a tight line to walk, that you don't want to overstate that people are, especially young people, are very sensitive to overclaiming green initiatives. So I think that letting it out in ways that invite commentary, they invite participation, and they are described as a process, a road that you're starting down or that you're moving down, and that you're not saying that you've achieved. There might be some achievements, like a building gets a LEED certification, or maybe you get an APEX standard kind of under your belt. Those things can be claimed because they're measurable, they are finite, and there's a third party verification, I suppose. But I think that it's important to engage your audience and engage your exhibitor base in it, and let them, tell the story for you. But make it findable on your website. Make it something that is supportable in social media, for example. If you have a section of your site that talks about your processes and the green road or the sustainable road you're on, support that occasionally through social media and drive people's awareness, so that you're getting that. You're not blasting it out loud through a loudspeaker, but you're getting that word of mouth and that awareness out there.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on that. I know that social media and the radical transparency it's brought to shows is also really helpful on pushing out and, maybe daily talking about what's been done on the audience's behalf. And it's a great way to tell your story, and it will get picked up, because it will also get picked up if you're doing something wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's important. It's important to sort of, in my opinion, share what you're doing as a show organizer at the same time, or kind of at the same level that you're sharing what your exhibitors are doing, and kind of giving that equal parts, equal play.
I'd also add to that, it's okay to admit, where you need to improve. And I think people really respect and are a little bit more understanding, I guess, if you're able to acknowledge, here's our goals, this is what we're doing, here's where we'd like to move in the future, and here's where we still struggle, give us your suggestions on how to improve. And I think, it really speaks to that authenticity that Kenji mentioned earlier that people really like. And I think there's a tendency for a lot of shows to say, if we're not doing everything great, then we don't want to talk about it at all. And they're almost don't want to share until, their story's perfect. And, to Kenji's point also, we're on a journey. Our industry is not sustainable, by nature, right? It just isn't. And it's just we're trying to do what we can. And I think I also really admire when I see a show like as at Sustainable Brands back in June. And what I really love is they put their messaging everywhere, so that it's not always in your face, it can be subtle, but they're making sure that, with the changes that they're making, you're understanding why. And I think, again, when you communicate to your audience and all those little touch points, they feel engaged, they feel a part of it, and maybe then they will be more willing to adopt the shift to paperless. If you're saying, by shifting to paperless, depending on, what your target message is, you can say the water saved, the resources saved, or even, what it's saving the organization in terms of money. And I think people, when they have an understanding of why, they're much more willing to participate than if it's just a shift or it's just there, and I think that is really, when I see that done well, I'm always really impressed.
I would agree.
And I would add, making a suggestion to those that are telling their sustainability story. We oftentimes when I'm doing some research for a certification, you're looking on websites and you're looking for the actual information, and it could be buried somewhere in a website link or within a place on the website where you're clicking through 3 or 4 different things before you finally reach the ability to read about what's happening with their sustainability initiatives. And my suggestion would be proud of that. As Lindsay was saying, even if it's some of the bad things, there's probably many, many, many good things. Put that out there and get that out into the main web page where people can readily access it and see exactly what it is that you're doing.
Great, John. Should we go to your slides and you can talk to us about how do we get people to comply with this? Sure.
I think that the carrot or the stick analogy is it's kind of a simple question, simple answer. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about sustainability, if I can, and talking about it in terms of the trade show exhibitors and what they're doing, what's happening in the industry, to kind of marry into what Kenji was saying. Sustainability, as we know, is trending more. It's trending more closely aligned with big corporations. Most of the exhibitors on the trade show floors, their mother companies or their home offices are probably having some sort of a sustainability initiative. It's being, as we refer to it, baked into their brand, and it's really part of their story. So because it's being a part of their brand, it's being driven down through the supply chain, which is a very important aspect of what's happening within sustainability in the industry itself, because corporations need to understand what is happening with their supply chain. They certainly don't want to be caught unawares if they're purchasing something from someone 3 tiers down that is doing something very environmentally unfriendly. We've seen things happen with Nike. We've seen things happen with other big corporations where their supply chain had a weak link in it, if you will, and that came back to haunt them. So these are some things that are very important to know about getting involved in sustainability initiatives. And it's not stopping at the trade show floor, meaning people are now starting to bring their sustainability story to the trade show floor, and it's becoming more apparent, especially with shows like Greenbuild. If you want to go to the next slide, we can go there. So knowing that this is happening within the corporations of the people who are actually exhibiting, the opportunity for event organizers starts to open up. And there's a learning, the number one checkpoint on this slide, talking about sustainability being aligned throughout the organization, is actually talking about, does the exhibit manager, who's dealing on a day-to-day basis with all the logistics of getting to a show, making sure their booth is packed up, making sure everybody's there, making sure all the badges are cared for, do they know exactly what's happening at the C-suite level with their company's sustainability program? If they do, great. There's definitely probably alignment there so that they can translate that down from my previous slide and not stop it at the trade show floor. They can implement sustainability program all the way through the show. And as Lindsay was mentioning, pack-in and pack-out processes, Kenji mentioned, paperless programs. All of these are examples of bringing the sustainability into alignment throughout the organization. This is a really key opportunity for organizers to educate their exhibitors. If the organizers are providing a sustainable event, and we'll talk about that in a moment, they certainly can help with the education of aligning throughout the exhibitor's organization, or making sure that that alignment is in place. Company meetings and trade show exhibiting is often overlooked in terms of sustainability and what organizers can do to continue, again, to educate on what exhibitors can do at the show, pre-show, and post-show. This also kind of speaks to, again, just echoing some of my colleagues here, Kenji mentioned about alternative show opportunities. There are virtual events, there are hybrid events, so you can still use that impact as a marketing tool. You may not need to be on a trade show floor to do it. And then clearly this is an echo of Lindsay's conversation about sustainability standards, and I would say that just kind of piggybacking on all the things that Lindsay said, which were really important, that it's a behavioral change. It's, as she said, level 1 and level 2, or level 1 certification is cost neutral or cost savings. It's really about changing the behavior within your organization to create that process that the CEO from Patagonia was talking about. And so now, to quickly answer the question, is it the carrot or the stick in terms of getting exhibitors to comply with sustainable initiatives that maybe the organizer wants to provide and wants to hand down? Again, looking at Greenbuild, they're clearly using the stick format. Although it's a very soft stick, it still has a hard end to it, because if exhibitors are interested in exhibiting at their event, they need to comply. Their exhibits need to comply. Their practices need to comply with Greenbuild's requirements. So that's a clear example of using a stick. And is it being detrimental, or is it being is it having a negative impact on Greenbuild? I would say absolutely not. In fact, I think it's a very positive thing, because they continue to, their exhibit space continues to grow, and their show continues to grow. And I'd also say that in terms of whether or not you use incentives in terms of, sponsorships and things like that that are available to market yourself as a green vendor, or you're using the requirements like a green build, it really depends on what your show is focusing on. If your show is a sustainable show and it's focused on, or not sustainable in terms of initiatives, but sustainable in terms of content, then absolutely you can use probably both of those types of formats in terms of getting exhibitors to comply, because they want to be there anyway. It's their information, it's their market, they're going to want to be there. In terms of using, if it's a show that isn't necessarily related to sustainability, but you want to create a sustainability program around it, then certainly there may be some guidelines that are required, or you're going to be wanting to include a number of ways that you can partner with your exhibitors to get them to be interested in being a part of that sustainable community. This last slide is really talking about, what Kenji was talking about in terms of communication. Making sustainability real as an organizer is imperative. It doesn't matter if you're using the carrot or the stick. Communication is the key. Sustainable practices in your promotional materials, engaging in attendees and vendors in the why, and the why might not necessarily be just why you've implemented or why sustainability is important to them, but it might be why you've implemented sustainability in your show and how they can benefit from that. Making the connection with your exhibitors, clearly the carrot stick question is directed directly to this, and it's a matter of making sure, there's that word alignment again, making sure that you're able to help the exhibitor understand where their alignment is. It's a great opportunity for organizers. Organizers quite often talk about education for exhibitors goes unnoticed or isn't necessarily well attended. I think that's a conversation for maybe a different webinar, but certainly there are ways of engaging this stakeholder effectively to allow them to understand what you're looking for and what may be beneficial to them. And then obviously incentivizing the exhibitors to exhibit sustainably. I think one of the key points to this slide is the last point, which is for organizers looking at how you can monetize your sustainability assets. We've talked in the past with organizers about creating green communities, green vendor communities within their show, because to the point about not stopping at the trade show floor, if the attendees coming to the show have a limited amount of time and they're looking for green vendors, it should be promoted in the directory, it should be promoted before the show, it should be promoted in banners around the show floor, and if you can sell sponsorships into that, that's a great way to create another revenue stream.
Thank you, John. You did an excellent job answering an age-old question. I want to stick with the sustainability sponsorships for a moment. And Kenji, can you talk a little bit about sponsorship opportunities as well?
Yeah, I think that's a great segue. I think that monetizing the initiatives you have is definitely a doable thing, and we've experienced that significantly at Outdoor Retailer, and even at some of the other shows within the MO portfolio that have taken our lead. I would say that he made a really good point about what I would call kind of the impetus behind how aggressive you can be about your communication. If your industry, for example, green build, literally is based around building products with a lighter environmental footprint, that is, you can be pretty aggressive about talking about your initiatives in that context. in the outdoor sports context, it's probably not quite as wide open and fundamental to the show and the industry as green build, but it's still a pretty core part of the outdoor sports experience is, of course, preserving the access to trail and water resources and having wilderness and having clean water and air and trees and all that stuff that we like to recreate on and in. So back to the sponsorship thing, though, I think some of the examples that we've been able to monetize in our Green Steps program are recognition, as John was saying, about listings and making it easy to find. So not only easy to find in the show directory or in the daily magazine, but also using floor graphics and signage. Ideally, you can make that signage out of recycled or PCR materials. There's the paper listing we talked about. We do a benefit concert or a Battle of the Bands that is a fundraiser for different nonprofits, some of them tied to green initiatives in the industry. We have a program we're rolling out called Reduce Single Use, which I talked about earlier. Recycling bins, biodegradable concessionware. There's lots and lots of different ways to sell sponsorship, essentially, on these programs because our exhibitors want to be seen as taking the lead in these ways. And I think that's the last point I would say is you're setting up a competition amongst your exhibitor base to see, in a world where products are by and large becoming pretty commoditized as far as the quality and the reliability of them, how is a brand going to differentiate themselves? Well, this is one way they can. They can be the more sensitive, the more green, the more environmentally progressive, and that's a differentiator in a lot of markets.
That is such an important point. Thank you. So let's talk now as if we were first-time trade show organizers, and each one of you take a couple minutes and talk about your tips for how would you roll out your plan. What would your steps be? How can you get started? What kind of resources?
Well, I would suggest taking a look at the ASTM standards, and I think they really do offer a very nice checklist of best practices. And I think talk to to echo a lot of what I said earlier. To talk to your venue, talk to your suppliers, and ask them what what sort of sustainable practices they already have in place. What are some programs that that you can participate in? To start the conversation early on in your process, and then again, we said if you wanted to use the ASTM standards, that's a checklist. That's out there. It's common language. And of course, always make sure to engage your attendees and your exhibitors with any major changes. Well,
I would say don't reinvent the wheel. There's our Green Steps program at OR has been in place since 2005. There's kind of a best practices list or a de facto best practices list up there. There's also great shows like Natural Products Expo and Green Build that John mentioned. I mean, these are shows that have lots of experience and information that you can find out about ideas to implement. And you can just cherry pick, the top 5 or the top 3 to start that process if you're a new show organizer.
That's an excellent point, to streamline it into what you're already doing. And how about you, John?
I think Lindsay and Kenji covered it very well. However, I would add, I think, making sure that not only are you engaging, and Lindsay touched on this, but I think not only are you engaging your suppliers and your exhibitors, but I'll reiterate the fact that you want to engage your attendees because they're the reason your exhibitors are there. It's always the chicken and the egg question, but they are the reason your exhibitors are there. They're wanting to do business, and they're wanting to do business with your attendees. So actively engage them and offer them opportunities to participate somehow in the program that you're rolling out. And I think that you'll find that it's going to help exhibit sales. It's going to help sponsor sales. It's going to help all those really nice things that you're doing on your revenue side.
We have a question that's come in, and I will let, this is a great question, let any of you take it. It's, can you expand on the definition of greenwashing, please?
I think that was a term that I used, and it is when you're making claims about initiatives that are environmental or that are sustainability grounded, but they are not backed up in any factual way or measurable way, and it's sort of I think it's probably related to the standards that John can talk about, but it is definitely not good for your brand if it starts to get out there that way, and it can spread virally. So it's really important to avoid that if you can, by not making bold statements that cannot be backed up in any kind of measurable, factual way.
Exactly.
A term I've heard recently, too, that I thought was interesting was accidental greenwashing also. And, I think that is one, I suppose is pretty true, because it's, I think greenwashing has this connotation that there's, you're trying to deceive, and that's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes people just don't know. They're trying to do good, and they're just, not aware. And so I think, just being authentic with what you're doing and making sure that, you're, like you said, fitting it into your existing program. I think those are really good ways to avoid the notion of greenwashing, saying you're green when you're not, saying, making claims that aren't true.
I have not heard that term before, Lindsay, but I love it and I'm using it.
Yeah.
Because I think that does happen more often than not.
Yeah, I do, too.
Yeah. Well, thank you to all of our panelists so much for joining us today, and I think we've had a great discussion and lots of wonderful information. And I also want to thank our sponsors, Signature Boston and Onstream, for sponsoring us today. Thank you very much.